I'm going to show you how to make a document that's special, where you can apply just about any adjustment to it. And as you move the sliders around in that adjustment, you're going to see something that looks just like curves. And it's going to show you how you could reproduce the same look using curves. And therefore, the more you get comfortable with how other adjustments compare to curves, the more you might be able to get comfortable getting started with curves and getting better at curves. Curves is by far the most powerful adjustment in all of Photoshop. And in fact, many of the adjustments you have available in Photoshop are really using curves behind the scenes and just trying to simplify what it's presenting to you. But anytime it's simplified, its amount of power and precision goes down dramatically. And so if you can learn how to do the same adjustments you're used to and do them with curves, you're going to have more control over the process. So let's dive in and see what we can do. Here's the document you're going to end up with. And just to show you that this will show you what other adjustments will do, let's try it out first with curves. I'm going to do a curves adjustment layer, and I'm just going to do something in curves. And if I have the document set up correctly, this document on the left should reflect whatever I'm doing in curves, regardless of how complex it is or how weirdly shaped it is. Regardless of what control I move, this is going to show me what kind of curve would need to be used to do the same thing. Well, that's obvious when you're in curves, but if you throw that adjustment layer away and you instead go to something like levels, now let's see what these 5 controls would do, but how you could do them in curves. So if I grab the upper left slider in levels and I pull it in curves, that would be the same as moving it so the curve becomes flat in the lower left. There's actually a slider at the bottom of curves that would do that. If I were to move this slider, you see what it does up at the top. And in curves, all you'd have to do is there'd be a slider right down here you'd move over and would do exactly the same thing. Then to move the middle one, just move it around. You'll see the kind of curve that you would need to make. And the bottom ones, they're pretty simple. You see that brings it straight up. All you'd have to do in curves is grab the dot that was already existing there, move it straight up. And over here, we got that one. All right, so how did I make this and how can you have this so that you're not limited to learning how levels would be replaced by curves? You could try other adjustments. Well, let's do that. I'm going to make a document from scratch by going to the File menu and choose New. In here, the only thing that's important is that the document is square. So you see, I have mine set up for 7 by 7 inches at a resolution of 100. That will make a document that is 700 by 700 pixels in size. It doesn't have to be the size. It can be any size you want as long as it's square. And I'm going to have it in RGB mode. Then I'll click Create. I don't care about the other settings. Now what I want to do is reproduce the 2 gradients that usually appear in curves. You might not remember them, so let's open curves so we can take a look. You see this gradient right here? We're going to need that gradient to be at the bottom layer of our layers panel. We want a gradient that has black on the left and white on the right. Then above that, we need another gradient that has black at the bottom and white at the top. And it's going to look just like this gradient, but it's going to fill the entire document. And that's what we're going to make. So let's do it. I don't need this layer. I was just showing it to you so you'd know what those gradients look like. Now, I'm going to come down here to the adjustment layer icon. I'm going to choose gradient, and that should make a gradient that fills my document. I'm going to click on this little down pointing arrow so I can get to presets, and I'm going to choose the preset that goes from black to white. Then I'm going to click on this little preview that's here because I need to change a setting related to that preset. When I do, this comes up and the only thing I need to change is a setting called smoothness, because when it's at anything other than 0, there's not an even distribution of tones across here. And we need it to be evenly distributed, so I'm just going to click on the word smoothness and bring it down to 0. That's it. Then click OK. And what we need is our gradient to be black on the left side, and right now it's not. So I just need to change the angle that's here. It's at 90. I'm just going to type in 0. Now the gradient starts on the left with black and extends all the way to the right, just like the one that was found at the bottom of curves. So I'll click OK. Then I'm going to throw away the mask for this layer because I don't need it. Yeah, sure, go ahead and delete it. I can throw away the background layer because I don't need it either. We just needed this. And I might even name my layer by double-clicking on the name here, and I'm going to call this below, because that's going to end up being below the adjustment layer we put in, like a levels adjustment layer or something else that we want to see how to reproduce. So there we go. We have one gradient. Starts on the left with black, goes to the right with white. Now let's duplicate that layer. So I'm just going to choose Layer, Duplicate, and it'll let me name it. I'm going to call this one Above, because this one's going to appear above any adjustment we apply. And I now need this to look like the second gradient that was in curves, the gradient that was on the left side of curves, and that one had black at the bottom. So to change the setting for this layer, I'm going to double click on this little thumbnail image on the left side of the layer in the Layers panel. That'll bring up the settings for this, and I'm just going to change the angle to 90. And that makes it so black is at the bottom. Click OK. Now what I'd like to do is have Photoshop show me where these two layers differ from each other. And what I actually want from that is to have it tell me where they are the same. And let's see if I can do that. Well, all I need to do is change the blending mode in the top layer to a choice called Difference. And now what it's doing is it's representing the difference between those two layers using various brightness levels. And it's actually really simple. Let's visibly compare these two layers, see what's going on. I'm going to hide the layer that's on top. And in here, look at where black is. Black is on the far left of the image. It's all the way vertical on the far left. Then let's hide that layer and turn on the layer that's above. Where is black here? Well, it's at the bottom. So where would those two layers be identical if the other layer, the one we're not viewing now, had black on the far left? Would it not only be in the lower left corner where we would have black in both layers in the exact same position? I think so. Let's do the same thing for white. In this layer, look at where white is. It's at the very top. And if I hide that and show you the other layer, look at where white is. It's on the far right. So where would those two layers be identical, where white would be in the same position? Well, if the other one had white across the top, wouldn't it be right up here in the corner? Then if you were to do the exact same thing with, let's say, 50% gray, well, 50% gray would be halfway between black and white. It'd be right here in the middle, vertically. And in the other layer, if I hide this one, turn on the other, it's halfway up this way. So the place that it would be absolutely identical would be in the very center of this document. So when I view both of these layers at the same time, and the top layer is in difference mode, what it's doing is it's telling me how different those layers are using numbers. And those numbers are being represented by different amounts of light. So wherever the two layers are absolutely identical, I see black because that is 0 light. It's the number 0. So right here, there's absolutely 0 difference. Where it starts to differ, it gets a little bit brighter. The bigger of a difference there are between the two layers, the brighter it gets. And up here, it's as bright as it could possibly be because that's where those two layers are as different as they possibly could be. In one layer, black would be found there, and in the other layer, white would be found there. But you don't have to understand this. You just need to have that layer and have it set to difference. But now I only care where those two layers are absolutely identical, and so let's get Photoshop to show us just that. I'll go to the bottom of my Layers panel, I'm going to add an adjustment layer, and I'm going to use Levels. In Levels, all I'm going to do is tell it to take this slider, which what it does is forces areas to white, and I'm going to say force absolutely everything in this image to white, except for what is solid black. And you can do that by just grabbing the slider and moving it all the way to the left, as far as it goes. Because there's going to be a 1 pixel gap in there because you can't get it all the way to the far left. And all that's going to do is force whatever shade is directly below that to white, along with everything that's brighter than it. And so you don't have to understand anything that I just blabbed about. The only thing you have to know is make these 3 layers. And you don't need the mask on the top layer, so feel free to drag it to the trash, although it's not going to hurt anything. And so now we have a special document, and this is all we needed to make. Let's take a look at what's in it. First, at the bottom is a gradient with black on the left, white on the right. If I hide that layer and show you the next one, this is a gradient as well. The only difference is it starts at the bottom and goes towards the top. And that second layer is set to difference mode. So if you have both of those layers turned on at the same time, that top layer is going to interact with one below and show you where they're different. But we only care where they're absolutely identical, and that's the only place in this result that appears as solid black. And so we have one additional layer on top, and it's just forcing everything except for black to white. Now let's use this and see if it works. The only thing you need to do is click on the bottommost layer. Then if you want to see what a various adjustment would do, go down here to your adjustment layer icon and choose one of your adjustments. And just to confirm it works, let's try it with curves. Because whatever I do in this curve should be reflected in the document we're looking at over there on the left. And that looks like the same shape. So I think it's working. I'll just throw that away and just make sure that bottommost layer is active when you come down here to add a different kind. Let's go over here and try posterize. And you just bring it up. Okay, posterized means horizontal dashes of equal length and spacing. But with curves, we could draw that. You'd have to use the little pencil icon that's in curves. But you could control this more. You'd be able to control how wide each step is. You can come over here and say, well, what about that thing called exposure? What does that do to my image? Well, exposure. Okay, can see exactly what it does in curves. But you can do that for most adjustments that would only affect the brightness of a picture. If you start adjusting color, it'll be a little different. I have a more sophisticated version of this document for color, but you can try things. You can go over here and try, let's say, color balance and start moving things, and you'll see how it moves things in different directions. But that's beyond what I want to do here. Here I just wanted to show you how to make that simple file, and then if you do adjustments that only affect the brightness of your picture, this file will work fine. And some other day, maybe I'll show you how to make the one that will show you how to do color adjustments as well, but you got to get started with something, and hopefully this gets you there. If you want to get in depth though, know that I go much deeper on another website. It's mastersacademy.com.